Welcome to Trust the Badge. In this episode, I interview Mr. Jenaro Morales, who is a former U.S. Border Patrol agent and a former U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent. Mr. Morales reveals his many stories in his time in law enforcement and shares his perspectives about how the view of law enforcement today needs to be changed. Mr. Morales, who has a bachelor's in journalism, describes how journalism today isn't what it used to be. Let's begin with an introduction of Mr. Morales.
Hello, my name's Jenaro Morales. I'm a retired federal agent, 24 years with U.S. Border Patrol and with ICE deportation. I did 12 years as a deportation officer. Well, actually, 12 years as a Border Patrol agent first, and then 12 years as a deportation officer. And the first 12 years I was assigned there, the first part of that first 7 years, I was assigned to San Diego sector, the Chula Vista station and the Brownfield station, where I was doing line watch duties there on the U.S. border with Tijuana, the U.S.-Mexican border there. So, and then after that 7 years, I went over to the academy there and taught for 5 years. I was in Holland for a year, also doing, deportation liaison, what it was called back then. And I was a supervisor in the deportations. And then I came back over here to Washington, D.C., and did my last 5 years there in D.C. I was the unit chief for the repatriation division. So I did the travel documents unit. I was with the ICE operations. I was with the 3 or 4 different units down there. But when I got tired of it, I retired in 2015. So that's kind of my little story there in a nutshell, what I did.
That's a really interesting story. Thank you, Mr. Morales. What encouraged you to become a federal agent?
Well, that was kind of a fluke, really. I think I was a senior in college. There, I was going to Wichita State University there in Wichita, Kansas, studying journalism. I got my degree in journalism, my BA in journalism. And in my senior year, I went with my roommate up to the federal building so he could apply for a job with, I think it was with the IRS, if I'm not mistaken. He was a computer dude, a computer guy. So while I was waiting for him to do his business, I saw a flyer that the U.S. Border Patrol was taking applications. So I said, wow, I would like that because, I've taken a lot of Spanish courses too. I'm from a Hispanic background, so I took a lot of electives in Spanish, and I thought, well, I'd like to get a job using my language skills. So I applied, and, there was a hiring freeze at that time. I don't know why they were taking applications. It was a hiring freeze. It took them about 3.5 years before they actually brought me on board after I applied. So I was already doing work in journalism when I got, the offer. Actually, I did journalism for a while, then wasn't enough money there, so I started doing insurance, and that's when I got the job offer. So I said, bye, I'm going. I've been waiting for the job for a long time. So I went ahead and took a kind of an adventure, I guess. I was living down in Kansas, and I moved over to San Diego to be a border patrol agent. So kind of what happened there. It was an adventure. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
That sounds really good. And why specifically ICE? As you've done Border Patrol, you started off with the Border Patrol, and if I'm not mistaken, you went straight to ICE afterwards, correct?
Yeah, correct.
So why'd you transfer?
Well, I was kind of at the end. I thought I've kind of done everything that I could think of here in the Border Patrol, and I've kind of had enough of it, honestly. I was at the Border Patrol Academy. I did 7 years in the field, but as you move up, you have to move out if you want to move up. Otherwise, you'll stay at the same level. I started out at GS5, retired to the GS15. So I hit all the rungs. Some of them went backwards and went back up. But anyway, back to what you're asking, I figured I'd hit my end there in the Border Patrol. I was stuck in the academy, and then I had the opportunity to jump out and become a deportation officer. So I took it. I actually had to bust back and take a step back with the GS13. I busted back to GS12 and became a deportation officer. But actually was very, very fulfilling experience because I learned all about the immigration law that, I had studied about in the Border Patrol Academy, but hadn't really applied it. And the deportation officer, it's like being a paralegal, I suppose is how you would describe that job. The cases come in, you review them for what they're charged with, the immigration charges, the deportation charges, and then you correct them because usually they're written wrong. So you go review them. Okay, well, he violated this. Well, then this is not the deportation charge that would apply. This is the charge that we need to put on him, to present to the judge, the immigration judge, for a final order deportation. take a lot of brain power versus a lot of physical power to do the job. You're actually learning what's going on behind the scenes because as a border patrol agent, you just make your arrest. You put, they teach you how to do one or two charges at the station. These are the charges that we charge them with all the time, and so you charge them with that and you never see the paperwork again. Well, as a deportation officer, I was receiving that paperwork and I said, well, wait a minute, that's not even the right charge. This is what you can be charged with if the judge is going to give the order of deportation, So that's kind of what I was doing, reviewing the paperwork, getting it ready, giving it to the attorney so that he could present it to the immigration judge and get an order, final order of deportation. And then when he got the order of deportation, I would get the file back, and then I would start working with the local country, whichever country he was from, he or she was from, to get him a travel document so that he could get permission to travel back to his country, to be removed from the United States. So it's kind of a long process. Some of these people were in detention, 6 months, 8 months sometimes. It depends on like Chinese. We get Chinese and we worked them the best. So they kind of like all over the country, they bring them to Bradenton, and we would handle them here in Bradenton. We would deal with the Chinese and we would keep them detained. And after 90 days, we'd have to do a post order custody review. It's called a POCR, the acronym for it. And you review the case and say, well, yeah, the chances of getting it, you review it. Are we going to be able to get a document? Yeah, it takes a long time for China. So stay in custody because he's likely to abscond. So we wouldn't let him go. We'd keep him in custody. And then after usually around 6 months, we would get a travel document for him, and then we would make the arrangements to have them removed, usually via escort. So we'd have two officers. Sometimes I was lucky I'd get to go on that trip, and get to actually do the removal and take them to China or wherever they're going. So I travel all over the world with the deportation officer, taking people back where they needed to go. So, you did the paperwork aspects of it, the office work, but you also got to get out and do the enforcement, the removal part of it too. So it was interesting and very rewarding. I felt like, because you're dealing with people that are desperate to go home too. They don't want to be detained in jail, So these people are desperate to go home and they're broke. They don't know what they're going to do. So, on some of these escorts, usually on most of them, if I sense that with the guy, because I get to know them because they're detained, and I go visit them once a week to let them know how the case is going. If I got a sense that they were desperate for money, they were going to go home broke, I'd give them $30 or whatever. We're getting per diem every day for our travel time and stuff, money for food and stuff. So I would give him $30 so that he wouldn't arrive broke, and that was before we would have left, the detention center. I'd give him $30. Okay, this is so that when you get home, you can get your cab, you can call your mom or do whatever you need to do, get some, and then I would buy their meals for them too, if we were traveling. We ate, they ate, and all that, So you try to make them comfortable so that they didn't create a scene on the plane, because these people that are being escorted, they're high risk. They're not your average person that you can put on a plane by himself and, nonstop flight to wherever they're going. There's a risk that they may do something on the plane. So we would have two officers per escortee, to make sure that everything went flawless and there weren't any issues, on our end. So that's kind of how we worked it. As far as giving them money, not every officer did that. I did because I felt better doing it, and I knew that I was going to have those guys. I'm telling you, they love you for it, because they know that you understand how they're feeling, and it makes life so much easier, because they're all stressed out anyway. The guy going to China, he doesn't know whether he's going to get thrown in jail, and that's been known to happen. They get deported, then they go to jail there in China, So these guys, I had a Chinese I was taking, and same thing. I gave him a little bit of money, and he was all concerned about how he's going to get, if I turn him into the officers there at the port of entry, he would go to jail. I said, I'll tell you what, when we get there, I'll give you your document. I'll let you walk through the immigration by yourself, and we'll be behind you. So I did, and he got through immigration right away, no problem. Didn't get thrown in jail, and we got secondary and all that, got the once over. And by the time we get out to the front of the airport, he was waiting for us. He was waiting for it. He was so happy because, he was convinced that if I had taken him and presented him to the officers, he would have been thrown in jail. And there was no real rule, I suppose, that said I had to present him to the officers, I just had to escort him and make sure that he got to the country in return. So I did it that way, and he was happy. He would not leave us alone. He wanted to buy dinner, and he wanted to share the cab with us back in the city. He was like a changed man. After we had arrived there. It was quite unique,
This sounds
So
really interesting. Thank you for sharing that story. You kind of already answered this, but were there any other specific duties that you had as a Border Patrol agent and working for ICE?
yeah, in the Border Patrol, I did the line watch. We would be in San Diego. You got all kinds of terrain. You got mountains, you got hills. You've got water, rivers. So I mean, you've got city streets. San Ysidro, and you've got downtown San Diego. So every day you would come into work and say, today you're doing line watch, which means you're going to be working in the hills that are along the border fence. Oh, the next day you come in and say, okay, today you're doing city patrol. So you're going down to Logan Heights, there, a rough area of San Diego, and you're with a unit, like it's kind of like a SWAT team, but we were in sedans in our uniform, regular border patrol uniform. But we would go, we would hit the streets, and we would look at. And after you've been doing a job for a while, you can tell. I know they kind of call it profiling, but I mean, I could tell when I first got to San Diego doing the job, I couldn't tell how these officers could tell one that's an illegal alien and one that's here legally. They all look the same. But once you've been doing the job, their behavior tells you everything. I mean, you can tell this guy's here illegally. And without even asking them a question, I know the guy's illegal. I go up and talk to them, they run. So you go on a foot chase and you finally catch the guy. Everybody in Logan Heights, there's got a screwdriver in his back pocket or a weapon of some type. They can't afford a gun. They got a screwdriver, a knife, something, to defend themselves because Logan Heights was a dangerous area. So when you go to Logan Heights to do the city patrol, when I knew I was going, because I got picked for some reason to always be going down there, and I would get stressed out. I knew something was going to happen, you know. And I did get hurt. Actually, I had a situation where I fell through a window and cut my hand and was off duty for a few months, and they compensated me a little bit for it, but I got pains in my hand still today, But that was we would do city patrol, and then you would do local sedans where you're driving around and you're spotting people that are just across the border, and you can spot them. They got weeds in their hair, and I mean you can just tell as an officer you become aware of who belongs and who doesn't. And so we would you know we would pull over loads, smuggling loads with people trying to go up north smuggling illegal aliens, making money off of them. I wouldn't call it human trafficking, but that's when you traffic for like sex or whatever. But it's human smuggling. The difference. Trafficking is when you're trafficking to gain to abuse somebody, like to prostitute them or something like that. Versus human smuggling, they just smuggle people up north and get paid to move the bodies. Traffickers move the bodies and then they enslave them. So we did both. So we were fighting all that kind of stuff down there in San Diego, and I did that, and sometimes you would get assigned to a detail. I was on the anti-smuggling unit. We were catching smuggling rings. We would try to break up the rings and stuff. We went in a situation once where we spotted a vehicle, a load vehicle, and we followed it. Went to a house, put them in this house. And the house was all boarded up. All the windows were boarded up with plywood, and we were able to, get kind of. I don't know how we did it, but we got a peek into the house of what was going on. And once we saw what was going on, we went ahead and we entered. And there were over 100 women and children in this house with no toilet, no food, and for bathrooms they had, like 5-gallon paint buckets, and they were using the bathroom in these things. And they'd been in there for days, and it was so hot in there, and it smelled so bad. When I walked in there, I almost vomited. It was horrendous. The smell was awful. And so we got the PD came out, San Diego PD, and everybody was there. The media showed up. We ended up getting an MCI bus, a big bus, and loaded it up and, brought them back to the station and processed them and all that, But these people were I think they were being trafficked. I don't know. It was women and children. You tell me, it wasn't like the working class man here, vulnerable people. So, but, those are the type of things that we did. I was also assigned to the San Diego County Narcotics Task Force, which I did that for, I think, 14 months, right before I left. I was buying dope undercover, on the street from illegal aliens. I was from Kansas. I wore boots and jeans and, cowboy shirt, whatever, and I would go buy dope on the street. And then we would, make small buys, and then we get them to bring in the big amount. And then when they brought in the big dope, then we do the bust, and then we would serve warrants sometimes about once every 2 weeks. We would serve warrants. We'd meet up like in a Walmart parking lot, and we would go and do the enforcement, arrest people out of their houses. We hit them at 3 a.m. when they're sleeping, knock the door in, and you know, arrest them, drag them out of the house. They're wanted for drug violations and testify in court, federal court, and all that stuff. So it was interesting.
Those are some really interesting stories. Thank you for sharing them. It looks like you have a lot of experience in dealing with many suspects and various tasks on the job. Out of all of these experiences, what surprised you about working for both the Border Patrol and ICE?
Well, Border Patrol, honestly, when I first got on, my girlfriend said, "You're crazy. Those guys are rednecks." She had seen what's on TV, Jack Nicholson or whatnot, on these old TV shows about the Border Patrol, Charles Bronson. And, I joined in 1991, and I was surprised that the Border Patrol agents were young Hispanic men like myself. Probably 90% of the agents were Hispanic, or at least 80% of them were Hispanic, Latinos, and they would say, "How can you do this?" My own brother, became a doctor. He came up to visit me. I'm not getting political, but he was bleeding hard. And he come up, "How can you do this to your own people?" I said, "They're not my own people. My people obey the laws. So, that's maybe they're yours, but they're not mine." And then he went to LA to do his residency. And then about 6 months later, came to visit me. "Oh, these illegal aliens, they're draining the system. They're our hospital. They come in, they get treated. Then there's no money they don't pay for their bills. And we're stuck with the bill and all that. They're really hitting." I said, "Well, they're your people. Remember, you told me they're not mine. They're your people. How come you're not paying for that?" So it's a drain, on society. The fact that they're coming in here and they're tapping our resources when our resources are already full. I mean, we got our own people, and anyway, that kind of surprised me. The fact that it's just the level of Latinos, I suppose, and the level of humanity, because even though we're doing a job that's tough, and the people on the streets and just give you dirty looks, the locals, we're doing a job that, in my opinion, is honorable, and it's a job that we've been mandated to do by Congress, and we're just enforcing the laws of our nation to protect our people. That's kind of what we were doing, and the fact that it wasn't as redneck and all that is what I kind of thought it might be when I joined up, but I did it anyway because I wanted an adventure. That kind of surprised me. The humanity side of it, I suppose, and the age, the youth of the agents that were doing the job. And they're just like me, young Latinos.
I didn't know that actually. I didn't know that majority of Border Patrol are actually 90%
Yeah,
Latino. I could
I'll
go.
say the old school version of the Border Patrol, they're a white man enforcing border laws, And my girlfriend, she thought that that's what I was going to be doing. And I didn't know. I was just going to go do it, because I wanted to eat Spanish. So I wanted to go do it. I kind of wanted to eat adventure. I was young. I think I was I was 31 when I actually finally got in. But, like I said, the surprising aspect of it is that there were so many Latinos doing the job, and they were young men like myself. They weren't cowboys and cowboy boots and, you know, all that, Jack Nicholson looking. The reason I refer to Jack Nicholson because he made a movie called The Border, On the Border, or something like that, way back in the 80s. And it was about kind of the redneck of Border Patrol, which is a Hollywood stereotype. But we're not like that. That's not what we really are. We're good people. We're family men. We have, we all had families and stuff, and we're just trying to make an honorable living and to take care of our nation, take care of our border. A lot of us weren't military, hadn't done military, but this is our way of serving. So
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really good. So, knowing with all of your experience as you're a veteran in law enforcement, what changes would you like to see today in immigration customs and drug enforcement if you worked in that area and Border Patrol?
honestly, an unshackling of the officers, unshackle them, let them do what they signed up to do. You got these politicians and everybody. You got the media that's painting them to be these terrible people, and they're getting a bad rap. And then they got their hands tied. They're not even doing what they signed up to do. You've got them over here doing it now. With the open borders that we got going on. You've got them, buying, bringing diapers, bringing food. Caretakers versus going out and doing the enforcement that you're trained to do in the academy. The Border Patrol Academy was the most rigorous academy in the federal system. Well, at least when I went through in 1991, they prided themselves on being the toughest academy. Their washout level was high. You might have 60 people in your class when you go in, and when you leave, you might have 40. The attrition rate was high because the physical requirements, the law, the legal requirement, knowing the law. We had to memorize the law. We didn't have to just know it. We had to memorize it. you know, for a test for a written exam. And, we had little cheat sheet. We do charts, and we were taught how to do little cheat sheets and learn the charts and being able to do all this stuff. But it was all it was very rigorous. And then the Spanish, I think that's why a lot of Latinos read it, because a lot of your non-native speakers just failed out because they couldn't learn that Spanish language.
Yeah, that makes sense. That definitely to unshackle the agents. That
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
complete sense. Yeah.
I just
Um,
feel like now they're not allowed to do their job, and it's really hard. I hate that. Yeah, I seem to ramble off your question, your original question, but yeah,
no
they're
problem.
not allowed to do
Thank you
their
for your
job
stories. Yeah.
that they signed up to do, and that they're mandated to do by Congress. They're not doing it. They're doing
Right.
other stuff. They're doing, instead of enforcement, they're doing like support jobs, that they hire contractors to do.
Yeah, that makes
They're,
sense. Hmm.
yeah, I've done some contract work since I retired. With the feds, with this influx of migrants that's coming in. I was doing compliance oversight, so going over to the camp where they got the kids and making sure that they're treating them good, that they're fulfilling the contract like they're supposed to do. These private agencies that are doing that. So, but anyway, back to your subject there.
Oh, of course, no problem at all. So, speaking of those changes, do you see any difference in today's immigration control and border patrol compared to before when you were in law enforcement?
Yeah, a lot. As far as I think micromanagement is what's going on right now. The officers. Well, when I was going, we didn't have. First off, there were no digital cameras. Nobody had cell phones. You know, so the chances of you being filmed when you're doing your job were like almost obsolete. It was not going to happen hardly ever. Unless you were set up, which I never heard of it. But now, each officer has to run around like he's being filmed all the time when you're out in the field doing your job, enforcement work. You've got to. My impression, I haven't been out there lately, but my impression is if you're out doing your job, you better be doing your job like you're being filmed, because you probably are. You probably got a camera. You're going to be on TikTok, or you're going to be on the nightly news. So, and I think that by having that, it's kind of like a check and balance. I think by the people, on officers, but so knowing that you're being filmed as a captain, you being filmed or high, you're going to probably cause you to do your job better. That's unquestionable what you're doing. There's no question about that. I'm legally within my bounds. That my actions are unquestionable. So I think it's probably a good thing in a way. But I see a lot of the technology that's going on too. There's a lot of technology in the field on the border that was not around when I was out there. We didn't have all these, because we were using Vietnam era military equipment, night scope, night vision equipment, and stuff like that. Well, now they're using stuff probably from Desert Storm. I don't know, but I know it's a lot newer than what we had. They got motion detectors and stuff like that we didn't have back then. You know, but we had back when I was doing it, we had like a sensors. They would we had a dispatcher would call out underground sensor. So when you run by a little sensor, it sets off an alarm, and the dispatch says, "Okay, I got a hit on the 223." Well, you got to know where the 223 sensor is, and then you got to know where it leads out to, and go lay up in front of it and wait for the people to come through. That's kind of how we did stuff out there in the hills. Now, they've got all kinds of stuff that I haven't been out there, but from what I hear, they've got a lot more technology than what was around when I was out there. So things are better. They're better equipped. I'm not sure about the training. I did teach at the academy for 5 years, but my last 5 years there. But I don't know. I know they shortened the academy and they made the Spanish a lot easier, and they watered down a lot of stuff. They try to make it easier so that they don't fail out so many people, because it's expensive to bring them in and train them. So I'm not sure if the training is as good as it was back in the day, but there's a lot of changes that have happened. But like I said, when you can't go out and do your job, it doesn't matter how much technology you have. If you're not allowed to go out and use it, it doesn't do you any good.
That is something that needs to be talked about more. It sounds like in your experience, you had a lot of interactions with a lot of people, especially with your use of Spanish, using your job to travel and let many immigrants go back to their homes.
Hmm.
How often did you have to interact with the American public and the American community? And how often were you seen as bad in general because you're law enforcement? How often was that?
As bad.
Yes.
Well, in San Diego, we were bad all the time. They didn't like it there. This was even back in the 1990s. The public locally, they didn't like it there anyway. You just knew you weren't wanted there because they thought we were outsiders and were there, stopping, I guess, their friends or their people from coming across. I don't know, but we had a
Oh,
couple
that's interesting
situations that almost became
because
riots here at Cathedral.
I find that interesting because you're protecting them, and I I just find it
Yeah,
really
yeah,
shocking
yeah.
that they would
So
see this terrible
yeah, they didn't
people.
they didn't see that. This is a local. They're Latinos, mostly here in San Ysidro, probably 99% Latino, and
Okay.
they didn't like it because they thought that we were, I think, occupiers. That's kind of the feeling that I got. I mean, and we would go in, and border patrol agents are taught to ride alone. You don't ride with a partner unless you're in training, field training. Usually, you don't ride with a partner. You're riding by yourself. So you're taught basically whatever situation you get in, you better be able to handle it on your own. you know,
Wow.
and yeah, and so you don't bite off more than you can chew. And if you got to learn how to judge a situation and either step back and say, okay, I can't handle this above me, so I need some backup on this. And so you call your partner, hey, whatever his star number, like, hey, 218, can you meet me down here or whatever, and then you meet him, tell him what's going on. Okay, well, let's go in and handle the situation. It's more than I can handle. So that's kind of how that went. And it wasn't really with the people crossing versus the locals. There was a lot of gangbanger types and stuff down there, in the area. And you don't want to get in a room with 30 gangbangers, and you're in there by yourself, in uniform, walking around acting like you're untouchable because you're not. Nobody's untouchable. And I
Yeah,
think
that makes mhm.
yeah, my son is studying law enforcement. Both of them want to be law enforcement officers, and he sends me videos and stuff. But I see videos of these cops, and they're just like, it's an embarrassment. They're an embarrassment to themselves sometimes, because I see it. They're just like acting like they're the cock of the walk just because there's a cop. You can talk bad to people, and you don't. You're supposed, if you're any good at your job, you're going to put yourself at their level. You're not going to act like you're better than anybody because you're not. You always bring yourself to the other person's level, and you're less likely to have an altercation. You know, it's a psychology type thing. You treat people the way you want to be treated, and I think that's something that my parents taught me when I was a kid. So it's like basic instinct. But some people don't have that, and they get filmed, and you see it on TikTok and stuff. And I say, wow, that guy's an embarrassment to law enforcement. He makes that's why he makes the rest of us look bad. Somebody sees that video, say 10,000 people see it, they're all going to think cops are bad. They're not. That
And
guy's
that's a
bad.
common issue. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really that's that a good thing that you mentioned that because that is actually a very common issue today. Usually there will just be one video of law enforcement, probably a single law enforcement officer breaking the law, not deserving the badge that they have on their uniform. And most of the time, many people think that that's what every other officer is, and that's really not the case at all. It really needs to be more widespread that, of course, those officers, they will be held accountable, and of course, they will probably be fired, but that doesn't mean that every single other law enforcement officer out there is the exact same.
Well, that's the thing. When you have good moments, officers don't film each other. So, you don't have a film of a border patrol agent giving his lunch to somebody that he found out in the hills that was lost for 4 days and starving, and giving him his drink, that he brought his lunch because he's assigned up in the hills all day long for a 10-hour shift, and he can't get off that hill because he's got to stay up there. So this officer giving his lunch, I'm saying that because it happened to be, I did it actually, but people do it all the time. Officers have compassion, and we see, and we hurt, and we feel. So when you see somebody that is starving, you're going to give them your lunch. You're going to drive down, but you're going to drive off that bound and go to Burger King and get them something to eat because they're hungry, you know, and nobody wants to see somebody starving. I mean, I have people that praising, thank God you found me. We were freezing up here, because San Diego has different terrain. It's got mountains where there's snow, it's got desert, it's got everything, beautiful area, at least it used to be. But, I was up in the mountains and I found these people that were up there and they were freezing. I put them in my Bronco, turned the heater up for them, gave them what I had for myself to eat. Here, you guys eat this, and Meanwhile, I'm bringing them down, to take them in because these people need to help right away. They couldn't really wait. I didn't feel like they could. So we do a lot of judgment calls. And we do a lot of humanitarian stuff that never, never, ever gets told. You know, and it doesn't get filmed, doesn't get put on TikTok because it's not provocative. You know,
Right,
so
and that is funny to mention as well because many of the time when law enforcement does do the right thing and does do things that are wholesome and are heartfelt is not very widespread at all, and it's not shown on the media as often either. That is something that needs to be mentioned as well, and it is very unfortunate that has to be the way as to where it's only the bad things that law enforcement does that is showcased. Um, yeah, thank you for
yeah.
sharing. Mhm.
Well, I studied journalism. That's what I got my degree in, and I'm glad I didn't pursue it because what I see now is it's just a total it's a betrayal to the American people of what's really happening out there. And
Yeah.
they're the ones that spread story, and every news outlet out there is reporting it, and it's maybe not even real. You know, it may be a lie. It may not. But they seems like they get an agenda and they want to push that agenda. Right now, cops are bad. We had the George Floyd thing, which I think is falling apart now. It's being proven that this guy's in prison and shouldn't even be in prison for, this George Floyd situation. Yeah, maybe, the way he got him down on that neck hole. But then again, if he was taught to do that at the academy, and now you're holding him responsible for doing the way he was taught to do. I mean, what's up with that? I don't agree with that. You don't put somebody in prison for doing his job the way he was trained to do it. You hold the agency responsible. The officer doing what he was taught to do the way he was taught to do it. So I don't know. When I think a lot of the stuff is coming out now, at least I've been reading, that a lot of the George Floyd stuff is coming out that this guy may be in prison unjustly, and on top of that, he just got stabbed. You know, did you hear about that? He was stabbed in prison.
I did actually hear about that. Yeah, I heard that he
Yeah,
was stabbed in prison. Mhm.
I'm not sure what's happened with it, but yeah. But yeah, the media, they're doing an injustice to the American people. I studied journalism. What they do on TV is totally against anything I ever learned in school back in the 80s, actually, when I was in college. So I don't know. I don't know what they're teaching in journalism school nowadays, but hopefully it's not what we see on TV and what we're reading in the paper because, you know, fabrications and lies just don't cut it with me.
Thank you for noticing that and sharing your perspective on that. In your experience working for both of the agencies, what did you encounter or see on the job that just gave you more motivation for your work?
I think probably the human trafficking and the smuggling element of people that are innocent was probably, as a Border Patrol agent, what motivated me more than anything else. Seeing people that are being abused, innocent people. I get it. They're breaking the law. They're coming here, but that's a removal charge. It's not a crime. I mean, not a major crime. Not like not even. I don't even see it as bad as like carjacking or robbery or anything like that. I mean, although it is federal law, the level of what it reaches doesn't is not as bad as a lot of these other crimes. So I just think that people that are being abused is something that really struck to me. I don't like to see people being hurt, you know, physically or mentally, and women and children especially, I was telling you about that load house that we found that had women and children in it, and they were stuck in there for days and without any air ventilation because the windows were nailed shut, and you know the windows were covered with plywood and everything, and then they were given a 5 gallon bucket to use the bathroom in. It smelled horrible. I don't know where they were going or what they were going to do with these people, but you know who knows? Slavery? I don't know, but it wasn't good, and that probably struck me more than anything as something that's wrong that needs to be fixed, and it struck to me, pulled on my heartstrings probably more than anything.
Thank you for sharing that. That is something that would definitely give the person more motivation for their work is when they see the evil, I guess, of humanity and then to try to
Yeah,
combat that. That is very brave. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for your service. Going back to the perspective of law enforcement by the media and by the public, what do you think is the most common misconception the community has about law enforcement?
I think that law enforcement is the enemy, that we're thugs, and it is the media. And, even politicians sometimes will get on their high horse there. And you know, do you remember a while back where the border patrol agents were accused of whipping these aliens? There was a horse patrol with their there was a big scandal, and it was all fake. It was all about these agents were. This is how you maneuver the horse, and you use the reins on the horse to actually the horse is trained. You know, when you use these reins, you move them and you move them around, and the horse will move a certain way. Well, the media was trying to say that they were beating these illegal aliens with the reins, the horse reins. You know, it was all fake, and then the politician got involved, and it was just a big nothing. Well, my friend, actually one of my better friends, was actually the chief of the border patrol at that time. I asked him, I said, "What's going on with these guys? You're not going to let these guys get railroaded, are you?" He said, "No, I'm the Joe Biden can say whatever he wants, and whoever can, Mayorkas can say whatever he wants, but I'm the one who dishes out the punishment." You know, and he was a horse patrol guy too. He had been on a horse patrol, so he knew exactly what was going on. You know, he said, "No, I'm not going to punish him," and he didn't. He didn't. He ended up retiring though. I think they forced him out recently, so he's not the chief anymore of the border patrol. But
Okay, yeah, I actually
yeah,
didn't know about that story. That sounds like something that definitely needs to be talked about more, of course, with law enforcement being portrayed in such ways. In your opinion, what specific scenarios put law enforcement on the downside when projected by the media? For example, do you think use of force is a common scenario that puts law enforcement on the downside?
yeah, I do. That's a big one. I mean, the media is all over that too because it gets viewers for them or it sells newspapers for them. So they're big on that. And I think it's a bad deal that they're making law enforcement the bad guys because when you're in trouble, who you call? You call the law enforcement. That's who you call. You call the police. You call the sheriff when you're scared and you're in a position where you feel vulnerable. You're going to call for a law enforcement officer because they're there to serve and protect. That's always been the motto, and it is. That's why they're there. So I just think that you know news media is probably the biggest driver of making the law enforcement look bad. I just do. I mean, whether it be CNN or whoever, I mean, they're all bad, because they're all telling the same story usually, and it's sensationalism. It's what it's called in journalism, and we were taught that we don't do that. That's not reporting. That's trying to sell papers. That's what started wars and stuff. I think the Cuban War down there, the Spanish American War down there was all due to newspapers and stuff. So it's not good. The media I think has too much power and they go unchecked. And who's checking the fact checkers? Who's checking the checkers? Somebody needs to be checking these guys because they're not doing the American people any justice,
Right.
and they're harmful, of course. But and you know they push a lot of agendas that hurt everybody because when you take down law enforcement, you know who's going to take care of you? You better be taking care of you. You better be prepared to defend yourself and be brave enough to face the evil that's out there because there's a lot of evil. So, I can take care of myself, but I got a lot of training and I'm a good shooter and everything else, and I kind of, you know, when I'm walking down in public, I know what's around me. I'm always aware of my surroundings. A lot of people are looking in their iPhone. They're not paying attention. They're the people that get rolled and become victims because they're easy marks.
Right. And speaking of how law enforcement is portrayed on the media and of course all these movements, speaking of movements, what does the term defund the police mean to you? And of course, why shouldn't law enforcement be defunded?
Well, to me, it means chaos. If you're going to defund the police, that means you're going to take away their operational capabilities. That means
I
no
agree.
gas for the cars, no money for the officers, no money to feed the people they arrest. No money. When you're defunding the police, that means basically you're pro chaos. That means every man for himself, and I hope everybody's prepared for what's coming because you know something. People know that if people know that your door is open and you're not home and that you left your safe open and it's full of diamonds, you don't think they're going to go in there and take them? Of course they are. Well, defund the police is that door. They're the ones. That's opening the door. The police are actually what keep bad out of your house. They keep you safe at night. They keep you safe on the streets. You know that you can go to the store and you're going to come home alive, or your children go out for a burger and nobody's going to murder them because there's cops out there taking care of everything. When you defund them, you don't know. Your kid might go out for a burger and end up with a bullet in his head because, we're in chaos. And then of course, then you're going to have vigilantes, people out there. Okay, we got no cops. That means we're going to go out and take care of business, you know? And then it's basically the strongest, the guy who's well armed, the best shot, the most capable is going to be the ones who rule. And you're going to have tyranny. So, no, it's not good at all.
I completely agree. And speaking of the reverse side, do you think there should be more funding for law enforcement instead?
Well, yeah. And I think not only more funding, but maybe, I don't know what the training center. I was an instructor. Like I told you, I was a course development instructor there for the Border Patrol for the last 5 years. I was in the patrol over there in Charleston, South Carolina for 4 years. Then I went to Glencoe, Georgia, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and taught for a year. But I think because the times have changed, the training needs to keep up with the times. Training needs to keep up with the times, and I think sensitivity training is big. It was big when I was there, but it should be even bigger now because you have media pushing agendas, trying to drive people against each other, whether it be race, whether it be LGBTQ, whether it be male, female, they're trying to separate everybody. That's what I'm seeing. So you need sensitivity training. You can't please everybody, but you need to be able to do your job and do it in a professional manner and a respectful manner. When you're talking to people, like I said, you need to bring yourself to everybody. You bring yourself to the level of the individual. You don't act like you're superior because you're not. You're a cop. That badge is a privilege. It's not a right to have that badge. It's a privilege, and it's a trust, and you need to live up to that trust. So I think the training needs to be brought up to. I'm not like that. I haven't seen any of the training lately. I don't know what's going on, but training needs to be. Whoever's doing this training, in charge of the training department, need to make sure that the training is keeping up with the times. That to be TikTok for one, like we mentioned TikTok, and that's just a quick one, because a lot of these people, and you got provocateurs out there that are looking to set up props to make them look bad so that they can put it on TikTok. They need to be aware of these things, that these situations are there, these traps are there, and they need to be smart enough to navigate through those situations without looking like idiots, and maybe possibly losing their job because of it. You get sucked into a trap and somebody makes you look like an idiot. Now you're on TikTok and now a million people have seen you. It's not good. So that you're training for those types of areas, with the technologies that are out there and the fact that everybody's got a camera and a video, public relations, dealing with people, how to handle people, how to handle groups of people, not, and remain in control of the situation because officer presence is big. Well, a lot of officer presence being used to be, especially the border patrol out there in the field. You're the baddest guy out there. Anybody crosses me, and you tell them you cross me. I don't care if everybody else gets away. I'm going to catch you, and you are going to be the one that pays. And the only reason I did that, it was like a scare tactic, so that you're holding 40 people on the ground by yourself that you apprehended by yourself. You lay them. What we would do was line them up. Set them. I would set them up like sit down on the ground on their butt, and then the next one his legs around him, and the next one just in like a big line. And you're just talking to people and trying to control the situation while backup comes to help you. Even to pat down these people, you can't pat down. When you're patting down one, the other 39 are running away. So you set them all down and you control them until you get help to manage them. So officer presence was really big, but that was a big thing that they taught us at the academy. But public relations, dealing with people, dealing with special interest groups out there in the field. I mean, we would run into people. There was a lawyer who made his living off of other people's misery, in that he would try to prop himself up so he would get on the news and get all this immigration business, by making us look bad, trying to make us look bad and make himself look good, because he was there for the people, but he was getting rich off of it.
Yeah.
So things like that, and like I said, no one basically when you're patrolling out there, you just need to patrol like you're always on film, like somebody is filming you all the time, because you probably are being filmed by somebody. You know, that's just the way it is. So it's big, and I'm not sure how they're dealing with those at the training academies. But in my opinion, funding is very important. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't know how to spend it, it doesn't do you any good. You know,
Right.
funding and accountability is really big too. And public relations, how the people perceive your agency, how the people perceive your local cop. That's important, because if the people don't like you when you go out, yeah, you're going to have aggressive encounters just because people don't like you. But if they're out doing things, uh, supporting events and all that, in the public, that goes a long ways too. Whether it be, I've seen a lot of things that where cops get involved helping out in situations, and whether it be fundraisers for a little child with cancer or whatever, you know what I'm saying? These are public relations events that make the whole agency look good. Those are good things, and they need to spend some of that money on things like that, not just enforcement. So training, public relations, and enforcement, of course. You got to have the equipment and the tools to do your job. So, but yeah, I'm pro. I'm pro. I'm retired Fed, but I'm pro, funding and even giving them more money, and
That's good to
maybe
know.
some.
Yeah, funding is definitely needed, and I feel like that the more funding that is dedicated to training and, of course, use of force and just other aspects that could really help the agents and officers themselves will overall help their trust with the community because then the community will know that their officers are well trained and they can have some good trust in them, even though they should already. But that's just an extra layer. And extra funding wouldn't hurt at all. It should ultimately help rather than hurt law enforcement in the community. And for the listeners, what message do you have for any current or future law enforcement listening to this interview?
Well, number one, watch your back, because nobody's going to watch it for you but yourself. I mean, whatever situation you get in, first off, you put yourself in that situation. So, make sure that you know what you're doing when you're getting into that, and also don't follow your fellow officers, rather, lead them. Don't become a follower, become a leader. You lead by example. Just try to be the best that you can be, and situations will be everything about how you are portrayed to your fellow officers and also to the public. How you behave and how you react in stressful situations. So like I said, be alert, watch your back, and also know that really, you have partners that are out there, fellow officers, but when you're out there, a lot of times you're alone, and you just need to remember that. I mean, help may be 10 minutes away, it may be 3 minutes away, but 3 minutes is the difference between life and death. Always be aware of your surroundings, and do the best you can do, and you know, to try to be the best, and I think you'll do well.
Thank you. And I'm sure they'll take that message. Ultimately, how do we as a community and as the public trust the badge?
I would say, as far as what we could do as law enforcement, is first off, we got to vet our people and make sure that they're vetted the best. I mean, when I was going through, we had guys that were not vetted, and then we had people that were, we had bad guys in our groups. I mean, we had people caught smuggling dope. We got people caught having, you know, raping illegals that are coming through our own agents. I mean, so you're going to have a few bad apples, but the vetting process needs to make sure that it's as good as it can be before you even bring somebody in. That if you've got good people, and then on top of that, you've got good training, and you screen these people to make sure that their mental health and all that, they're not going to snap and embarrass the agency and embarrass themselves. They put themselves in a situation where they could end up in prison. You know, all these kinds of things will help make a better law enforcement agency and a better community. So I just think policing themselves as you police the community is important. The police need to police themselves as they're policing the community. You see your partner and he does something that you don't think is right, let him know. Don't do it again. Don't do that again, because if you do, you're going to put me in a position where, you know, I'm going to have to do something I don't want to do. And it's bad because cops are all about we got each other's back here. You're a snitch or whatever. Because we're it's a brotherhood. Law enforcement's a brotherhood. These people are your brothers. When you're in a situation, who's going to save you? Your brother cop there, your fellow cop. So you don't want to put somebody in a situation where they have to do the right thing and put a dime on you because you violated somebody's civil rights. Where you treated somebody wrong, which everybody clearly your fellow officer saw it and didn't like it, thought it was wrong. So don't put somebody in that situation. Don't put yourself in that situation. So
Thank
that's how we
you.
trust.
And
That's how we trust the badge. I think by the community seeing these cops they're just doing a job that's tough and they're just like us. They're no better. They don't act like they're better. They're just here to protect us and take care of us. They'll see it when they see that the cops are out doing their job and at the same time they're policing each other. It's a good thing. Everybody wins.
that does make a lot of sense. Of course, law enforcement there to protect and serve their communities, and that needs to be understood more often rather than seeing law enforcement as the enemy, as you mentioned. So,
Yeah.
before we end this interview, do you have any final thoughts for me or for any of the listeners?
Well, I just think, right now we're in a slump as far as law enforcement, because of the media. I blame the media for it. I do. They're not going to, and people are seeing it, by the way. But, law enforcement's gotten a bad rap because the media, I think they're leftists, and they need to go back to their own, the media needs to go back to old school, real journalism, real reporting, and none of this jumping on the bandwagon or starting to jumping on a trend or whatever, that they're doing, they've got an agenda and that's not good. They shouldn't be agenda driven. So, I mean, if our media would get their act together, cops, America would be better off, not just the cops, but all of America, because they create a lot of division between people and between, different classes of people and between, well, law enforcement, which is a class of people of its own, in my opinion. So it's just not a good thing. So I wish that the media would just get their act together. I think our whole world would be better off.
Thank you. And I really appreciate your time today. I really enjoy that you're very passionate about law enforcement today and what changes need to be made, and as well as how we need to see law enforcement differently. So, thank you so much for your time.
All right, appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Trust the Badge.